Mr. President, it's an honor to be here today. And I was thinking about what I would say today and make it as brief but as personal as I could. But I have to say, on a day like today, it's difficult because we all have the privilege of being able to go to this floor on a regular basis to talk about issues, to talk about our country, to talk about the world. But we also have one of the great privileges to talk about those with whom we've served and for whom we have great respect. And this is one of those moments, and it's of great significance for me that I'm able to stand on the floor of the United States Senate as a native of and as a resident of the city of Scranton and Lackawanna County to talk about a son of Scranton. And I know this is a pretty big day for Delaware. Delaware is #1 citizen, and on this historic day for Delaware. But I have to say I'm so grateful to be able to say on behalf of the people of Scranton and Lackawanna County in northeastern Pennsylvania how proud we are today to be able to pay tribute to Vice President Joe Biden. There's so much to say about that history, so much to say about what it means to be able to stand on the floor and talk about his record, his life, his achievements, but mostly to talk about who he is. When I consider what he has contributed to our country, to his state, and to the world, it's difficult to encapsulate. I tried to jot down a few notes to remind myself of how best to encapsulate that life. I guess I'd start with the word integrity, maybe a word that we take for granted, but a word that has to be part of the life of a public official. I would say in the case of Joe Biden, he has the kind of integrity that is uncommon. Uncommon because not because it's a rare trait, integrity, but uncommon because it's so much a part of his whole life. He was a public official with integrity. We hope he is again when he might consider public office again. But he's also a person of great integrity when it comes to the fights that he's had to wage on behalf of people without power, the work that he's had to do as a public official, infused with that kind of integrity. And at the same time, the kind of integrity that you expect from a family member and a friend. So I would start with that word. Certainly the word compassion comes to mind. Every one of us can tell a story. I was just hearing stories yesterday from a colleague yesterday about a phone call that the Vice President made in the last couple of years to someone who was grieving, who was in the depths of the darkness of grief, and the phone call that he made to that person. I've heard stories over the years about not just phone calls, but visits with people, stopping into a funeral home for a long-lost friend who had lost a loved one, letters that he has written. I know a personal friend who lost his wife and his sons who lost their mom, and what the Vice President wrote to them just this summer. Over and over again, he's demonstrated that kind of compassion. I can remember it in my own case in a very personal way. It was only an election loss. I ran for governor of Pennsylvania in a primary. As many of you know, primaries are particularly difficult. I lost badly. No one called on Wednesday after Tuesday. One reporter showed up at my door, and I opened the door and really couldn't say much to this reporter, but I was grateful she was there. But I got one phone call on Wednesday, maybe a couple of family members. I come from a family of 8. I think my wife was talking to me. But other than that, the only person who called me was Joe Biden. And he made some kind of grand prediction. I thought he was just being nice, that I would somehow come back. But you know what? He was right. And he made me feel much better that day. And he may not remember it, but I'll remember that for the rest of my life. I think certainly when we think about the Vice President, we could center on another one word, justice, an abiding an enduring commitment to justice. His whole public life could be summarized in that word, and the commitment that he's had to justice. We could quote from the Bible, "Blessed are they who hunger and thirst for justice, for they shall be satisfied." I'm not sure Joe Biden has ever been satisfied yet with justice. He's always pursuing it, always trying to bring justice to a problem or to a situation or to the life of a fellow citizen. We think of what St. Augustine said about justice a long time ago, but it still bears repeating. Without justice, what are kingdoms but great bands of robbers? That's what St. Augustine said hundreds of years ago. Joe Biden has lived his life as a public official and as a man, as a citizen, with that same burning desire to bring justice into the dark corners of our world. And he knows that without that justice, someone is in fact robbed of so much, robbed of their dignity, robbed of their safety, robbed of a full life. But Joe, I think I'd say maybe the best line, with all due respect to the scriptures and to St. Augustine, was one my father said. He wrote it down years ago, but he probably gave maybe the best description of what a public official should be about. And I'm not sure I've ever attributed this to anyone else but him. He said the most important quality a public official can bring to their work are two things. Number one, a passion for justice, which of course Joe Biden has in abundance, and a sense of outrage in the face of injustice. That if you have both of those, on most days you're going to get it right. And his life as a United States Senator for 36 years, as Vice President for 8 years, and as a citizen for all those years and more, has been about that passion for justice and a sense of outrage in the face of injustice. We all know his record. We don't have to recite all of it. From the Violence Against Women Act, which we know is an acronym, VAWA, but of course an acronym doesn't do justice to the meaning of what that meant. And so many today have talked about how he saved the lives of women and families because of that legislation. So from VAWA to our ERA, as we called it, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, the act that helped dig this economy out of the ditch that it was in and rescue the country and improve the lives of so many people. He not only worked to get it passed, but then he made sure it was implemented. It might be the most popular piece of legislation 25 years from now, when people really appreciate what happened with the Recovery Act. From diplomacy to law enforcement, to not just supporting our troops, not just working on legislation and supporting them, not only when his son was a member of our armed forces, but long before that. But what he did very specifically to protect our troops. We know the scourge of IEDs, which was the #1 killer of our troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. A lot of those troops' lives were saved because of Joe Biden, up-armoring vehicles and doing all the work that he did to protect our troops. So whether it was national security or security on our streets, whether it was protecting women who would be the subject of abuse, or helping children, or improving our economy. On and on, we can talk about that record. But just as you can't just list achievements in a record and encapsulate what it means, so the same is true of a 36-year career in the United States Senate and then 8 years as vice president. Lincoln probably said it best. Lincoln said, "It's not the years in your life that matters. In the end, it's the life in those years." And that's, I think, true of Joe Biden as well. Two more points. One of the best qualities of the vice president, as a man especially, but also as a public official, is his sense of gratitude. If you knew him for a half an hour or for your whole life, you know that almost always he's speaking about people in his life that made him who he was, made him who he is today. Whether it's his mother and father, or whether it's his family. his whole family, his brothers and sisters, and his sons and daughters, and of course Jill. It's a reminder of how grateful we should be. In so many ways, when you hear Joe Biden speak, his speeches tend to be, on many occasions, a hymn to gratitude. And that comes through all the time. We know how much he suffered with all the losses he sustained. I was talking to him recently at an event in Scranton about his son Beau and his life, and what a patriot Beau Biden was. I think today we can say the following about the vice president. This is a man who was a great, great vice president. This is a man who was a committed and very effective United States Senator. But maybe most important, he's been a faithful son, a loving and proud husband and father, and a patriot. Thank you, sir, and God bless you.